You're listening to the Clean Comedy Podcast with your host, James Creviston.
Hey everybody, it's James of the Clean Comedy Podcast, and today I have a great guest for you guys. I found this guy by his actual posters of his podcast, which have a very Beavis and Butthead feel to them. So I'm pretty sure that's probably intentional. We'll ask him today, but that's how I found him. And I was like, oh, this is cool. And then I started listening to the podcast. I'm like, oh, this is exactly the kind of thing that I like to listen to. Like people talking about their lives with some humor in it, like all that stuff. And he's a stand-up comedian. He's from Seattle, Washington. He is the host of Fadam Friends. Please welcome Mr. Adam Tiller. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on, dude.
Yeah. Is the logo supposed to be reminiscent of Beavis and Butthead? Am I right on that?
Man, I'm sure with starting a podcast, what is this, like episode 500 or something for you?
Yeah, it's like 318 or something like that. I don't even know anymore.
Like it's you start it and like that logo that's behind you right now. It's like that's what you came up with at the beginning.
No, this is like the third iteration of this, by the way.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like you come up with a concept and like the show has kind of gone where it's gone since then, but we just wanted something that like was silly and would catch people's attention and kind of like wink at some of the stuff that I'm a fan of. So it seems to work if you liked it. I mean, some people look at it and they're like, what's that from? Or like who? And,
Like, I'm a huge Mike Judge fan anyways, so, like, the moment I saw that, I was like, oh, my gosh, this is cool. I thought that's what it was about. I thought it was, like, a Beavis and Butthead podcast, and I'm like, oh, my gosh, I need this in my life, right? So that's, like, how I started to it. And it's great, because you guys talk about so much stuff, so it's fun anyways.
Yeah, he's the best. Like, his, I saw an interview with him I think it was on Stern talking about, like, how he got started with Beavis and Butthead, and, like, he's a very smart dude. Outside of being super funny, but Chase Moore is the artist that he designed it. He's on Instagram. If anybody needs logo work, like great dude, turn it around super quick. And he's done a lot. Like we do a cartoon together too. So he does all the illustrations on that.
Wow. That's a lot. That's a lot of work. I write a lot for like comedy and do other things like that. I've written episodes and series or whatever, but it's like, an animation, any kind of animation, I'm like always jealous because it's like my favorite genre of comedy anyways, is animation.
Oh yeah.
Comedy.
It's just a comic strip, so it's not full animation, but when I started, like I wanted to just get my comedy out. So it was literally like getting some kind of feedback loop of, hey, is this funny? Is this good? Because like stand up is so you get feedback, then you wait basically 24 hours to do it again. And like we're fortunate in that we're in this like time now where you can like create stuff and get feedback instantaneously. But there was definitely like a lot of learning associated with that too. Like you start putting stuff out on the internet and then you start realizing like, wow, people get offended super easily or whatever. And it makes you look at your stuff more honestly. So I think it's good and bad just knowing that it can come back and you can, get some real feedback real quick.
Yeah. I used to have a joke that I did when I was first starting comedy about like my wife being blind and like slow and just kind of like making fun of that. She's like really smart, but like she doesn't pick up things as fast and she does wear glasses. She's like basically blind like a lot of the time. I made a joke and I was working with somebody and they got mad at me and they're like, you made this joke about ableism and you're this and that. And I was like, whoa. It's a joke. Like that's legitimately what it is. But they were like so infuriated that they ended up stopped working with me on the project that we were working on because they had watched some like stand up. Yeah. I was like, really? I'm like, and I even addressed it
too.
No, it was like someone that wanted me to work on a film script with them, and they just got super angry that I would say anything. Like I was like, my even addressing the joke that my wife knows about the joke, and I totally make fun of it, and like whatever, and acknowledge that it's also a joke, right?
Yeah.
But like that somehow did not.
Context doesn't matter to a decent number of people. It's just it's a really weird time in this space too. Like, I mean, I'm in an area where like inherently it's super progressive out here. And like I'm not a political comedian. I don't really it's not my thing. but you still got to be like aware of tastes and things like that. And I like going outside of the city and coming back and like sort of just kind of seeing that like, oh, there's not only one way of looking at things, and not like one way isn't specifically right or wrong either.
Yeah.
And like when you come across somebody like that, it's just like, it's just a very emotional minds, like they're not even thinking logically at that point. So it's a complicated thing too, because you also need to know when you're like, hey, am I just actually funny, or is this a joke that I think is funny but it's not for everybody? There's layers to it. So
Yeah,
you're gonna piss some people off sometimes.
I guess, and my comedy is like very clean, like very PG 13. So I'm very aware of what I say, thinking like, oh, I'm not going to offend anybody, but that's not how it works. So how long have you been doing stand up?
I've been doing it just like coming up on 4 years.
Nice.
So 3.5, 4 years. But I was like fortunate. I got into clubs really soon. So we have an awesome scene up here, and like it's a great place to be if you're a new comic. Like
Okay.
you get stage time and in front of real audiences quickly. And I think there's benefits to that and drawbacks to that. Like the benefit is if you put in the work, like you can build an act and build
Yeah.
it pretty quickly. The downside is if you don't look at like your uh where you need to work on things, you can get pretty comfortable and get some easy laughs and just think that you're killing when you're not.
Right. Like you're doing hacky, you end up doing hacky stuff unintentionally because you just want the laugh as opposed to actually growing your act and growing as a comedian.
Yeah, and then reaffirming like the region's preconceived notions about stuff, and like there's a lot of stuff where like when you start doing the road, like you go somewhere and you're like, wow, I didn't even think about this aspect of this joke.
Yep.
And doing it, like I think New York is so great for comedy in that like you're doing different boroughs and you're doing the jokes to those people that like it could either relate to or offend or whatever. Like you got to look that person in the eye to do that joke, and
Yeah.
you get that real feedback. So like New York is almost like this place where you can go to different parts of the country in the same area.
Yeah. Well, then also you have like international people in there. I've done Broadway Comedy Club, and they had like half of the room was international people, like some from like Australia, some from like Asia, some from like, I was like, what is going on here? And
Those
it was awesome.
crowds.
Yeah, it was great. It was great though because it's like, does your material work for everybody? And it does. It's not going to. Like that's just the truth. But so many comedians are like, oh, I can make anybody laugh. It's like, well, no, some things are not relatable. And like I had Australians laughing and stuff. I had like Dutch people laughing. It was great. But then you had some people who didn't get jokes because maybe they don't have that same life experience because that doesn't happen in whatever country they're from. So that was pretty awesome. That was one of my favorite things. And then I did Dangerfield's Comedy Club before it closed. I don't know if you ever got to do that one, but
I didn't, but I've heard that it was a great place.
Dude, it was so good. It was like this like really tight old school room with these giant red booths and stuff, and you're on stage with a piano. And it was also where like Andrew Dice Clay filmed or like recorded one of his first albums. So it was like it's this great room, and I was like, man, I was so glad I got to do it before it closed during the pandemic, which was terrible. But man, that room was amazing because it was a different kind of clientele too. It was like older, a little more kind of like not upscale, but like a little more kind of like bougie kind of people where they were drinking martinis while you're like telling jokes instead of beers. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like that kind of crowd. Dude, it was awesome.
New York is killer. Like I just saw Caroline's close, which is insane.
That is,
and like that's brutal. But like, yeah, it's so cool that like inevitably, I think that's where I want to end up.
Not LA? You don't want to come down to LA?
Oh, it looks so enticing all the time, man. It's like everybody seems so friendly down there to one another, and there's no like, backstabbing or climby behavior whatsoever. It's like LA is the place to make friends, it seems like.
It's a little bit of each. It depends on where you go. But yeah, you can have good or bad. But LA, what I find is LA comedians kind of look out for each other in that way. Like once you make friends with comedians, they kind of all kind of look out for each other because we all know what we're going through at the same time. And since it's funny because you would think it's like a giant scene, but it's actually a smaller scene than you realize. Like, yes, it's a big city. There's a lot of places to perform, but you know people, and there's that like 6 degrees of separation thing from anybody that you work with. Like, you know this person, they know that person, and then they know from this person, and so you all can connect. It's such a great way to do things. I've been able to work with like great people that I would never have otherwise in my life even probably seen besides like on the internet or TV. So it was like, it's a great place. I think
for
you
sure.
should come if you get a chance. Like, come
Yeah,
now.
no,
Man.
I say all that, but like I literally had a conversation this week with Nolan Culver. He's like he runs Third Wheel Podcast Studios.
Okay.
And he's an LA guy. He started up here, and he was saying the same thing to me. It's like there's all these like preconceived notions about LA, but when you get down there, like there's a ton of creative people that are going for it. So anywhere you go, there's like it's in LA is different than what it was before the pandemic. So
I agree.
I mean I know some guys that were down there, like my buddy Hans Kim was down there before like he went to Austin and then kind of launched his career and stuff, but there was a whole group of people that were like doing mics outside, and I don't know, it's there's a little bit of everything wherever you go.
Yeah. So what's your favorite part of like stand-up? What was like the thing that drew you to stand-up? Because it's a really thing where people either try it once, hate it and quits, right? Or do it for like 1 year thinking like, oh, I've seen this, I'm going to get famous, right? Off of 1 year of stand-up. I don't know why that's a real thing, why people think it. And then there's the people who stick with it past that 1 year, 2 year mark and whatever. What was the thing that made you want to get into it? What made you stay in it? Because it's not an easy route.
Yeah. That's a good question. Like I was going to a lot of shows like as an audience member, and I loved like going to comedy just from, I think we forget that as comics a lot of times is like what the audience is getting out of a show, because you're just focused on like doing the job, but like they leave feeling better most of the time, like ideally, right?
Yeah.
But
that's a goal. That's a goal, anyways.
Exactly. Yeah, and I was doing it, and I didn't know that it was as accessible as it is. Like I thought like everybody going on stage was, I mean, I'm in this scene where any of the local talent like works the club. So like anybody that you're seeing that's not brought on the road, like a road feature or whatever, is somebody locally. And most of those people, if not all of them for the most part, have day jobs. So it's like people that are doing this, but also doing comedy too. So I saw people doing it. I was like, wow, I didn't even know there was a scene here. And then I like dug into it, and I ended up taking a class, which a lot of people, have opinions about classes. I personally felt like it really helped me with joke structure and just literally getting me onto stage. I was so terrified of being on stage. Like I was having full panic attacks, and like it to this day, like I still have anxiety around, but I've learned like, what that is. And there's so much stuff with stand up where you're like, you have to know to ask the question, like you're about to go on stage and you're having a panic attack, and then you say to somebody, hey, do you ever feel that way before you go on stage? Like, yeah, every time. Yeah, and then knowing like, I don't know if this ever happens to you, like over time it's gone from like anxiety to your body like recorrects, and I get really tired before I go on stage now, because it's like my body's getting ready to receive all that adrenaline, so I'm like yawning in the back of the room before I'm going on stage. And that's a different, and when to eat, when not to eat, should I be drinking coffee, or like there's little things that make a big difference.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on the class thing. I think every comedian should take a class just on at least learning to write a joke. Even if you like, listen, no one's going to make you funny. That's not how that works. No, you're not going to pay a coach and like suddenly you're Dave Chappelle or Jerry Seinfeld. That's not how it works. But learning the joke structure, that's a lot of things that a lot of new comedians need to know, because if you go to open mics, you see them get up there and just start telling a story that they like did with their friends, and you have no context for the story, and they think it's funny, and the whole audience is like, we have no idea what you're even talking about, dude. Like, what? I don't know what you're doing. And that's where that every comedian needs that. I think that should be one of those things where someone should take every new comedian, teach them how to write a simple setup punchline joke. That's it. Like that's what you need the class for. And yeah, probably getting stage and stuff like that. And then the other thing is those little tips that no one tells you that you want to vomit before you get on stage. I don't know if you had that one where I was like, oh man, I think I'm gonna be sick. I should quit right now. I'm gonna be sick. I can't get up there. Like I've had that. And now I can't eat before a show. I never eat before a show. Even if it's a late show, I could go most of the day without eating. I'll live off of like energy drinks or something until the show's over. And then I'll go eat a giant meal and I'm okay. But if I eat beforehand, I'll probably feel like I'm going to vomit before I get on stage. It's weird.
Dude, and then you get into that bad habit of like eating at like 2 a.m, and that's what puts you to sleep now. And then you don't sleep unless you eat like a Thanksgiving dinner every night. So it's not a like one. I mean, I agree about the class and that it helps with joke structure. I do think one thing that can hold you back with classes, because I did a class and then I went to Second City and did like a stand-up intensive.
Oh, that's cool.
Which was the benefit of doing that was going to Chicago for a week.
I would love to do that.
Doing mics and like going to see what the Laugh Factory open mic looks like, because that's a miserable place to be if you don't have a friend that works the bucket. But the problem with classes, I think, is people go into them and you have to create a rubric, and people start following that, and then they get the mindset of like, this is the way that you need to do whatever. And they start coming into mics and they're like, well, this is a tag and this is, and like they're using the lingo and the mechanic, like understanding the mechanics before they even know what it looks like. It breeds hack. Like it breeds like cheesy, like, yes, that joke functionally works, but anybody could tell that joke.
Right.
And it takes, I mean, I fell into it really bad, and then you have people that they want to do a million writing groups. Like they're like, oh, let's get together and write. Let's get together and write. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. There's like, but you also like, if you want to do comedy, like it's, Ralphie May had a master class where he's like, if you're trying to do comedy, like you're not a civilian anymore. Like your life is going to be out 6-7 nights a week. Most of the time not performing, trying to like, earn your spot. And that isn't communicated in classes, like you're not going to writing group your way into knowing how to like feature on the road somewhere versus, headlining versus like, and you're going to get that from comics. Like and you're going to get that from comics after they respect the work that you've done that they already did.
Exactamundo. That's why, I've been lucky enough to be taken on the road by some great comedian stuff. I did San Antonio with Darren Carter. That was the best time because after every show, he would sit down and give me notes and feedback while we're having dinner and stuff. And you're like you said, we're eating at like midnight, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and he's giving me notes. So I like my phone recording on the table. We're shoving nachos and stuff in our mouth, and he's like giving me notes on like, this joke would work better if you did this thing. You did better tonight on this joke than you did last night about whatever it was and stuff. Or this said it was this, you let that thing deter you or stop you from finishing. It was just so good. I was like, man, first of all, you didn't have to give me notes at all. Like you didn't have to do that. You could just be like, yeah, whatever. And then like we eat dinner and go our separate ways, right? That's exactly what could have happened. But he wanted to spend the time to go, hey, work on this. And then when we were driving from the show, he's like, hey, what did you think about this? And we would talk about the sets and stuff. It was so good to have somebody kind of mentor you and give you advice and tell you things because he's been doing it for decades. He's was in Weird Al music videos and like been in movies and like done a ton of stuff and tours all over the country. Is like a Laugh Factory regular and is like a regular at the Comedy Store and Comedy and Magic. It's like, to have that person, one, be my friend, but two, also be willing to give me advice. That's the big thing. And that's what I think a lot of comedians are missing is they also either A, are too scared to get advice, or B, too scared to give advice too, or give like feedback to each other. Because they think like, oh, if I tell this person something and they don't like it, then I'm a jerk, and vice versa. Like if I ask somebody for advice and they give me advice that I don't want, even though I probably need it, they're a jerk, right? So that's like a weird dynamic as comedians. I don't understand that either. And I'm not for the writing groups either. I think that's like way too much. It's just like if you have a friend or like a couple comedians that you hang out with all the time, they're gonna give you notes on jokes. Like that's just gonna happen over time. But to like get a bunch of group of people together and try to write jokes, it's just not everybody's point of view is the same, and it's going to be weird trying to take like your point of view and put it into my joke, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe writing groups are good for writers.
They are, yes, agreed.
Like stand-ups, I think that's going to cause issue. But what you're talking about is like that mentoring type thing. Like that's essentially the result. Is this? It's the result that you're looking for. Is like, you work with somebody to make the product funnier or better. I do think it's interesting with feedback though. Like some people, there are people that give a lot of feedback without checking to see if anybody wants it.
Yeah,
and like you can rub people the wrong way with that stuff too. So it's like I always try to like, hey, if you want my thoughts on this, like I'll ask you, but like assuming that everybody wants your opinion on their comedy, like there are some people that they'll give me feedback and it's like I'm good, like we're doing two different things and like that's cool, like I'm not asking for it. But then there are other people where it's like if they're pulling me aside on something, you bet you're some listening, and it's a lot of that is based off of how I feel about like our different points of view. And like it's not always like do I think they're better at stand-up than me. It's like, do I trust their taste? And it's complicated. But I was trying to think. I think there's this documentary you were talking about, the like doing the road with your guy in San Antonio, and there was this documentary about the Boston comedy scene, and I'm trying to think what Joe List had referenced it a couple times, and I ended up like checking out. But it's about this Chinese restaurant in Boston that started the movement in the scene, and like just a bunch of like really good comics ended up.
Is it when stand up stood out?
Yeah, dude, it's killer, and they talk a lot about what you just said about like doing these one-nighters. Barry Katz booked like it was like 50 different rooms, and he pissed off a lot of people from like the story, at least. But there was all these one-nighters around Boston, like Mark Maron and like all these guys came up through there, and they learned how to do stand-up by going and essentially like bombing on one-nighters. Yeah. And like you bomb, and then you're with that other person that you like featured for, and the drive back they're teaching you stuff. Yep. And sometimes they're teaching you good stuff, other times they're teaching you bad stuff. You have to kind of parse through it. But it's, if anybody's like hardcore into stand-up, it's an incredible story about like, you know, how these people did this stuff, and then also like really the truth of what this industry is, and the fact that like there's a lot of people like kind of they come in the way they leave, you know, like you don't get into stand-up because you're living this fantastic life, and a lot of the people that leave don't leave with stardom, and I think that's important to understand.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And there's no shortcuts. Like I think a lot of people think like, oh, if I do the XYZ on TikTok or I do XYZ on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, I'm gonna get famous, and then I'm like touring the country. Yeah, you might be able to fool people for like a year or something, like, but eventually it's gonna fall apart. I've seen too many of those things where it's like, oh, they've got a lot of TikTok followers, we should book them, and then I'm like, they're not a stand up. They do like TikTok silly things, and they're like, no, they get people to come. I'm like,
dude, those crowds are so weird too.
Those are the weirdest crowds.
It's like it's basically a personal appearance.
Yeah.
But okay, if you think about that though, that person is, I guess, like if you go to a club, you get like the accolade of like putting that brand next to your name. But like, unless they're doing door deals, the club is cleaning up on that.
That's why they do it, I think.
Yeah, well, the club, it's great for the club,
Yep.
But the TikTok person, like, just book your own venue. What are you
Yeah.
doing? Like, there's a portable PA system that you can get for like $500-$600, and
Yeah.
you keep 100% of the door. Like, it's just to like go to a club for something like that. It's not even in your best interest. I guess maybe that you can like sell it to a bigger club, but like, dude, an A club, like a real A club, is not gonna book like something that's not stand up.
Yeah. Well, they push it as stand up though. They go, I do stand up, I do comedy, and you're like, but do you? But it's not like because I've seen it, I've watched it, and I've go, ooh, that's what you think this is.
Dude, maybe you're just doing stand up wrong. Maybe they've figured
I mean, listen, they're making way more money than I am at it, so maybe they figured out something. But I've also seen that like right before the pandemic and kind of right after the pandemic, seen those things happen where people kind of got famous during the pandemic because of TikTok or whatever, and do a show and just eat it. Like their fan base is there, like the people can, but eat it bad. And you're like, ooh, you didn't where you thought it was going to be a bunch of thumbs up and hearts on your stuff. That's not how this works. Like this is not the same thing. You're not doing it the same thing that you think you're doing.
it's weird. It is, but it's also not new. Like
No.
that's all it is like the technology changed, but like this was happening with somebody on a sitcom, and you go out and say, oh, it's that guy from that show, and they've never done stand up.
Yeah.
It's just all that's different is it's like an app on your phone versus some crappy TV show. So
Yeah.
it sells, like it's marketing, and it works well. But
Well,
like,
what?
no,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was going to say, well, what sucks is when somebody shows you the TikTok person, they're like, you should do this, and you're like, oh, bro, like, no.
Maybe they got a point though. Maybe
No.
look, let's tag team this. Let's set up an account together and just do like TikTok bros and go full, like, just lead into it hard. And then all of our peers will respect us too,
Oh
that's how
gosh.
you get respect. The irony though is like we look down on that. But like if one of those people like hit us up and like, hey man, do you want to feature on the road? It's like, a gig's a gig, dude. You're gonna take the spot. So like it's just those audiences are hilarious though, man.
Yeah.
I went on stage for one show. This dude was super nice, but it was like TikTok crowd. And you're like, how you guys doing tonight? And it's just like thunderous applause. Like they haven't been out of the house ever. Like this is the first time and just being around each other. And it was you ever been in front of a crowd that's so hot that you're like, this isn't even worth it for me to be in front? Like it's the opposite of a terrible crowd where it's like I could say anything and you're laughing.
Yes. I was supposed to get a tape from one of those crowds. I was like, oh, I can't wait to get the tape off of this. They didn't record it. I was like, no. I remember being like, I can say anything to this crowd. They don't care. Like they're into this 100%. I was like, this is awesome. This tape is going to be amazing. Yeah, the tape they didn't record that night. I was like, oh.
Yeah, I don't even. I mean, you can just juice up a tape if you really need to.
Nah, I'm not going to do that.
I'm just saying, like, it's like people always get all manicky about like, oh, I got to get the right tape, the right crowd, and all that stuff. It's like you got to get the jokes. Like if the jokes are there, like it's what ones are funny and what I'm not saying like I doctor my own tapes, but like
right.
trying to find the perfect crowd is you're never gonna like I tape as much as I can.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's a weird thing. Like some people I've seen like they're taping just to get like crowd work or they're just for like social stuff. And dude, I tape myself like once or twice a week, a couple times a week, depending on if I'm doing the weekend. And like I'm watching the tape to look at what I'm doing visually that I don't hear in the sets that I listen to.
Yeah.
So like I think if you do one or the other too much, it lends itself to bad habits.
Yep.
Like if you do like you're listening to your sets throughout the week and then you're watching, your weekend sets or whatever, you get a good sense of it. But I'm never doing it like, oh, what can I like piece out for a reel? Like if it's good for a reel, I'll put it on there. But
Yeah, I don't put anything. I don't put any reels up or anything like that. I don't do it for social media. I do it so I like. Okay, what do I need to work on? What worked here? Oh, that was a great tag. Oh, that was some great crowd work. That maybe I need to work more something. Maybe I can work that crowd work into a new joke or something like whatever it is. I'm always like reviewing stuff.
yeah,
So
it's helpful, man. And you see your own bad habits and like, it's, I don't know, to be like comfortable in this super uncomfortable place. It's like people that are great do it really well. And a lot of what you said, like I feature on the road right now with Dave Landau, who
okay,
he's super funny comic and been doing it for like 20 years. And like the dude makes it look so effortless.
I know. Isn't
And
that the best? It's the best and the worst because you go, wow, that's awesome. Like he just do it, and then you're like, I'm never gonna get there. Like that thought comes in your head, like am I ever gonna be able to do that? I don't know. I'm not.
well,
But you
it's
will.
his like background is like he did road gigs all across the country, everywhere he could. And he worked for this. And like once I realized, oh, you just have to like this is a job and you got to do it. And like I do podcasting and I do that stuff and I enjoy doing it. But stand up is what I do. Like it's what I'm excited to do every night. I have had some really killer podcasts that I liked a lot, but yeah, it's not like getting a joke to work and like punching up material and like I don't it's to me it's not even like the kill isn't what's exciting to me. It's like I want to that first laugh off of something new is
Yeah,
the best.
yeah. Do you play games like video games or card games or anything like that?
Dude, I just got a Steam Deck coming in the mail. Like have you seen those? It's like a
Uh,
Nintendo
oh,
Switch,
like the little thing like that. Okay, yeah,
but it's a PC. It's a
yeah. Okay.
portable PC. So I'm gonna get real weird with that for a while, I think.
Well, I play Magic the Gathering, so I don't know
Okay,
if
yeah,
you've ever
yeah.
played Magic the Gathering. So like there's a like style of Magic or like a kind of Magic called Commander. So it's a 100 card singleton deck, and I love to like build new Commander decks all the time. It's like building a joke. Like you have to put pieces together to see if it works or whatever. And it's that same feeling that I have when I do a joke and when I play that deck for the first time. Is like, will this work? What crazy things are about to happen? Because I thought when I wrote this or when I put this together this was going to work. Will it really work? And you see it in the wild and you go, ooh, I didn't think about that. Oh, I should have done this. It's such a good thing. And my brain, I love both pieces of those, building those things together because it just makes you really have to analyze. And then I take notes after my set where I'll listen to it and stuff. And I take notes after I play Commander of like what I messed up or what I need to change and stuff too.
Yeah.
It's the same like mindset. And I love comedy to me is like a game. Like, there's levels to it, right? You have to like keep working at it to move to the next level, and you're gonna get stuck at a level for a little while until you figure out the skill you need to get to the next level, right? That always happens, you know.
The only difference between those two things, I think, is one, if it works out well, you get laid afterwards. You know,
Magic. It's magic, everybody.
No, I think you're right too. I've actually heard people use that like video game analogy before too,
Yeah.
where it's like you have your little power ups in your sets where you know like how you can really get people and draw them in and things like that. So I don't know, it's funny you said that whole you do it and then you find out by their response what they like how they react. And I've always like said like writing jokes is like turning off the lights and trying to make a cake in the kitchen. And the only way that you know whether or not the cake tastes good is like you turn on the lights and the spoon is in your mouth. Like there's like you do whatever you can with the lights off, but you don't know until you're in front of them. And then you turn the lights on and you're like, oh, that like it's never like you don't know. You really don't. And that is one aspect of comedy that's like super frustrating to me is like you see other comics getting mad about new jokes and like oh, I can't believe that person said like they're working out material. Like
Yeah.
like you don't know, like what is offensive to you, and I know what's offensive to me, but the room is supposed to decide. So
Yeah.
like that's not yours to determine, and there's a lot of that in our space,
Yeah. Where they go, you can't say that. And you're like, relax, let them work through it. Like look, a lot of that happens at open mics for some reason where they go, they can't say that. And you're like, dude, this is the gym. Like, this is where you work out. Like, where else are you going to do it? He's not going to go yell jokes at people on the street. That's not how that works. Like, you can't do that. You have to go to the open mic. You have to work it out. Are you going to hear a lot of bad jokes? Yes, of course you are. But you're going to hear those diamonds. You go, man, when that guy or that girl figures out the rest of that bit, I want to hear it because it's going to be awesome. Or you go, oh, man, that's so good. Why did I not think of that bit? That's such a genius, that's the worst one when you're like, I've had that thought and just be like, man, that's kind of weird, whatever, and just thrown it away. But this person brings that same thought and just brings the thunder, and you're like, dang it, what was I doing? Why did I not pounce on that or whatever? It's like, it's crazy.
Well, the thing is too, is like, so you said you work clean.
Yeah.
Like when you have a clean joke that bombs, like it bombs differently than a blue joke or offensive joke or whatever you want to call it. So like controversial joke. So like something really dark. Like I have a lot of dark comedy just from like, my friends. I was an addict and like I'm 11 years sober and like had a lot of friends die and it affected me. So like the way I process like reality is through like having to deal with that grief and like make jokes about it.
Right.
And when you make a really dark joke that bombs, it bombs so much harder than a clean joke.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will be like, don't do material like that or whatever. But you can't pick what your comedic sensibility is.
Yeah.
And so then you're like going into, oh, should I just do these jokes for like what these people want? Like that a lot of times are your peer. And I don't know. It took me a long time to figure that out. It's like you got to just sort of follow your gut and also like hang with the people that are funny.
Yeah. And they get you and you get them, right? Because there's a lot of people you like that are funny, but you don't get each other. Like your styles are not going to be compatible, and that's okay. Yeah. They can still be great. You can hang out with them, do whatever. But when you want that feedback, you want those notes, you want that strength to grow. Those are the people. I have those people in my life that are like my good friends because we can go on the road or we can do jokes together, and they're like, no, that's not working because blah 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 blah, right? And they know you, they know your POV, they know what you do. And they give you when you go, oh man, how did I not see that? That's like the best when one of your friends tells you that joke's great, but the reason it's not the best joke or the greatest joke yet is because you're missing X, Y, and Z, and you're like,
oh, like, for sure. And then you meet another person like that who's like at that next level, and they're like they're breaking it down for you like 3-dimensional chess, and you're like, God, like this. It's like you said, there's levels to it. So can I ask, like?
Sure.
What is you're in LA proper?
Yeah, I'm a little outside LA. I actually live on the LA County Ventura County border, so like right outside the very end of LA, towards like Malibu, all that stuff.
Where are you like getting up and like what does your week typically look like?
I do. I have a group that I work out with that is like my comedy mentor and stuff. We go over jokes and work on stuff that I'm working on or things that I did at a show or whatever. Then I usually host or do a couple shows Friday, Saturdays. Sometimes I'll hit a mic on Monday or Tuesday. And then the rest of the week is writing and doing the rest of my other work stuff or whatever. Thursday, I never go out and do stand-up unless it's like a paid gig, because that's just like my kind of like off day, like my day to just like decompress or whatever. So like last night I did like corporate events, so it was like, okay, that's great. But I have my whole day and then I could go do the corporate event and I'd not be worried about it. But going to mics during that's just not great. So, but it's and I do JR's Comedy Club, which is, there's one in Simi and one in Santa Clarita. So I go host and work on those shows and just do that kind of stuff. I don't do as many mics as I used to do, just because I can work new jokes in for like paid gigs. And so I know what works, and I could add a new joke here or there. Not too many, maybe one or two. And that's kind of it. And then I work on those jokes afterwards the next week with my mentor and my comedian friends, we all do a Zoom call and go over jokes and give each other feedback and say, how did that work when you said it this way? Oh, you should add this tag, or I don't understand X, Y, and Z. Maybe that's why you didn't get a laugh. And we talk about like all of our sets and what happened on those sets. So that's really good.
Yeah, man. No, it's I always like to hear like how people like structure their like week, because like I it's weird to say. So mics and shows, like there's that weird gap where you're like, oh, I get this out of a mic and this out of a show, but they don't necessarily serve one another.
Yep.
And I know a lot of guys like in Portland where they go to so many mics, like 3 to 4 mics a night. And they have this scene where it's just like built heavy around open mic. And like it doesn't really prep you to do some of the like club sets.
Yeah.
But they're also like, dude, they're crazy good riff comics and like super loose and super conversationally funny and can make each other laugh. And there's like pros and cons to both. And I initially was like, when I started, I was like, oh, I want to get in front of the best crowds that I can as much as possible.
Yeah.
And then over time, I was like, oh, it doesn't really matter. Like you want to have a balance. Like you want to go in front of bad rooms as much as good rooms. And that's a whole skill set on its own. Like if you have the choice between a good room and a bad room on a given night, go to the better room. Like it's, you know, but don't not go to the bad room because it's bad. Like don't be, I read something Louis said about, like you just get on stage as much as you can in the first 10 to 15 years of doing comedy. Yep. Don't worry about that. And like the success piece and all that stuff. Like as soon as you start worrying about other people's success, you're moving backwards in stand up. And like, dude, when you went on stage the first time, like, were you thinking about getting paid to do it?
No, I did it. Here's where I did it. I think I've brought it up on the podcast before, but for you, I did it as part of like my like bucket list. I'm like, I'm going to turn 35. I should mark this on my bucket list of something to try. You know, I was like, oh, I'll just do it. And I did it. And I was like, oh, that was fun. I really liked it. I took a class or whatever and stuff. And I was like, I really like this. This is fun. And the people that came out and saw me, like family and friends or whatever, and I had other people say, and other comedians were like, hey, man, you're really funny. Like, how long have you been doing it? And I was like, oh, dude, this is like my first time on a real set. Because I was doing like practice stuff with my comedy coach and my comedy group or whatever.
It's crazy how many unfunny people are in comedy.
Yeah. You're like, ooh. But like but they were like, oh, you're really funny. Like, how long have you been doing it? I'm like, no, that was like my first mic or whatever. And then I was 9 months from about to be turning 35. And my wife was like, what do you want to do for like your 35th birthday? And I was like, I think I'm gonna do like a half-hour stand-up show. Like, I think I'm gonna do that for my birthday. Yeah. See, I saw your face. You're like, no, dude, what are you doing? Yeah. See, I had no preconceived notions. I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna do it. Like, write and work. That's what I did for 9 months. And I did a half-hour set for my 35th birthday. We rented out the club. We did the thing. People paid money for tickets and stuff. Yeah, it's terrible, by the way.
Dude, please, if we could air that tape, I would. Oh, God, it would be so beautiful. Just like if you talk about ego diffusion, just like.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Well, also the headliner for the show. So I featured, and the headliner was Preacher Lawson, like who's a friend of mine. So,
God.
so like,
he came up in my scene too.
Dude, he murdered. Like I already met him. And like I knew he was a murderer. I was like, this dude's gonna be. So I was like, no matter what I do.
Like
this was before AGT. Yeah, but this is before AGT. Like, I met him at a comedy club. I'm walking by. We're both outside, and there's some kind of conversation, and then we end up in a conversation, and he starts laughing, and we're making jokes back and forth to each other, and I'm like, dude, if you're not famous in like 5 years, the world is being robbed. You're like the next Eddie Murphy. Like I legitimately said that. He's like, thanks, man. Thanks. I appreciate it. You know, like that's great of you to think that. I wish. And then like, I think like 3 years later at AGT and all that. And I'm like, there we go. Like, oh, I should be a manager. Like I should just go scout for talent because I love that. So he was my headliner. I was like, no matter how bad I do, if I do bad, at least people will still have fun. But that show, 10 minutes of my set, great. The rest of that set, terrible. But people paid money for it and everything, and people came.
Sure.
But that was it. Like that was the thing where people were like, "Oh, you should keep doing this. Like, you're funny. Like, there's something there. Even Preacher was like, you're funny. There's something there. Like, you need to keep going, keep going, keep going. So I was like, all right, well, I'll keep doing what I'm doing. And so it just snowballed to like doing more gigs and doing this and doing that. I was like, okay, I guess I'll keep doing. And I had like a really good day job, like, making, close to six figures. And like, I just got burned out of that too. I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. So now literally my full-time stuff is writing, doing comedy, all comedy stuff, the podcast, all that stuff. I don't do any like 9 to 5 day job. I just don't want to. I don't want to do it anymore. Like, I spent 35 years thinking college and all that stuff was the way for me, and it wasn't. It was just like I was getting destroyed. I'm like way more creative, so I love it.
Dude, it's so hard to be around those people. Like the 9 to like I'm in the process of leaving my like date thing, and just to have that like space mentally. And just not have to put on that face and like all the like corny jokes and it's just conversations that go nowhere. My buddy, he started down in San Diego. Mike DeVore is his name, and he went to LA, and like he had a kid, so he had to get a day job, and he hadn't worked a day job in like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. And he called me the day of, and he's like, dude, normal people suck so much. Because they tell you a story, they ask for all your attention, and then the story just ends. And when you're a comic, like, you're used to like the payoff coming.
Yeah.
And then you look at me like, what are you doing? Like, you just want me to listen to you? Like, there's nothing funny or interesting about, like, what's going on? Oh, it's so funny. And I told him, I was like, dude, this was day one. Like, he didn't.
It's gonna get worse, bro.
At all. Yeah, not at all. If you're creative, like, it's just never gonna be comfortable, I think.
Well, what's funny is like I was always like that kind of like the funny guy growing up. Like that was my way to diffuse situations. Even being in the military, like you got that kind of dark humor, you got the humor to like kind of diffuse situations. So I was always that kind of guy. And I had friends be like, "Oh, you should be a comedian. You should be a comedian." I'm like, dude, you have to be like famous, get a TV show, and then you could be a comedian. Like, that's what I always thought for like the longest time. I had no idea. Had I realized that sooner, I would have probably started either in San Diego when I was in the Navy or in Las Vegas when I like went home, like, and to go to college or whatever and stuff. And then like not started in LA. First of all, no one should do that. I don't know what insane people are doing that. It's insane. And then
working, that's gotta be one of the worst places. No, I think it's probably the worst place to start.
It is the worst place to start. And then working a day job when you're starting comedy, people will also like tell you the worst jokes. Like, you could use that in your show. You can use that in your little stuff, your little skit that you do.
Skits.
Yeah, you're like, oh, yeah. I hate. I'm like, you should put that in your little skit things that you do.
Little skit, and then have them come out to your show. And
they're always racist, by the way. They're always like the most racist, worst jokes you would never, ever, ever say. Ever. Like, you can use that if you want. You're like, I'm not going to.
I'm going to open with it.
I'm going to open with your overtly racist joke, and then the rest of my set like, go great after that.
You can keep that if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think a lot of that stems from like people, they think they're funny, and they like, which they probably are. There's a lot of people that are funny, and they think that like because they're funny, if you're a comedian and they get you to laugh, that means they're like as funny as you, or like it's a weird ego thing. So that's what they're doing, is like they want to check to say, oh, I'm gonna size this guy up and show him what's actually funny. And super weird. It's like, it's so strange. But
I can literally talk about that like all day. That's one of those things. I want to. What is good for you? What do you have going on? What would you like to promote? Where can people find you? Find more of your comedy and your podcast? Because I really want people to listen to your podcast. It's so good. How many episodes do you have, by the way?
We are at like 145.
As you say, I think the last one I heard was like 139 or something. So I'm behind. But that's great though. That's great because they're very conversational like this. They're very comfortable. You learn a lot about people. You do a great job. Just so you know, you're a great podcast host. So I enjoy it. I want more people to do it.
Thank you.
It's not clean, everybody. If you're gonna, just so you know, if you're gonna listen to it from here, I want you to be aware. It's great though. So I appreciate like all kinds of comedy. So it doesn't matter. So
it's one thing with that is we're on YouTube now, and
good.
we weren't in the beginning. And a lot of the old episodes were not great. So I always preface that of like, hey, if you listen back, like you're listening, like keep in mind it was the process of like me starting comedy and getting better. So like it evolved and hopefully continues to. But Fadam and Friends on YouTube, if you can subscribe to us, follow us on social media. Also, I did want to say you mentioned just that like that entry into like stand up and like not knowing that this was like a career and stuff like that. When stand up stood out is a really good documentary of just like kind of showing like what like entry to mid-level comedy looks like. And then also this documentary, I think it's on Amazon, I Am Road Comic.
Yes, that's a great one.
Incredibly good. I've done some of the like rooms that are in that, and it's like it kind of like peels the curtain back a little bit. And then also I Am Comic is really good. That's I think made by the same guy. But yeah, Fadam and Friends, wherever you get stuff on audio, and then on YouTube, it's Fadam and Friends podcast. And then all my other stuff, my writing and some stand-up clips and stuff are adamtillercomedy.com.
Perfect. I'll put all that stuff in the show notes too, so you guys can have direct links to that, so you don't have to go back and listen to Adam talk about it and try to figure it out. We'll put it all in there so you can all find it and stuff. Adam, thank you so much, man. It's been so much fun. This is great. I literally like we could probably have a podcast and it would go on for like 2 hours every week. Like,
sure.
I know that would happen. It'd be so awesome. It's such a good. I'm glad to meet you. I'm glad that I came across your artwork. That's the one thing. You just need one thing to like grab somebody. Your artwork for me like touched my childhood Beavis and Butthead love, which I still have a love of Beavis and Butthead. It's just my whole thing. So.
Chase Moore, dude, check him out. It's at Chase MOR. He's super good. And if you ever end up in like Washington area, Seattle, North Seattle, hit me up, man. I'd love to do a show together and like hook you up however I can on this side. And I appreciate you taking the time. I know how hard it is to like schedule and do this, and it was a little back and forth. So thank you for the time, and thanks for having me, man.
No, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening. Have a good one. Go subscribe Adam's stuff. Go check it out. You're going to enjoy it. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good one. Bye.